When we look back at Watch Dogs 1, one thing that often gets buried under all the talk of hacking gritty Chicago and Aiden Pierce's vigilante crusade is how terrifyingly real the concept of data profiling was in this game. You probably remember walking through the streets with the Profiler app open, scanning random civilians. Their names, jobs, income, medical conditions, criminal records, addictions, or even their darkest secrets just popped up instantly. At the time, a lot of us treated it as a neat little gimmick. But revisiting the game in 2025, it feels way more personal and honestly, a little invasive because it mirrors what our lives actually look like today. Think about how normalized it's become for companies and apps to know everything about us. We casually give away personal details every time we post, swipe, or even just agree to terms and conditions without reading them. Watch Dogs 1 basically gamified data surveillance, years before it became part of everyday conversation. The game never outright explained how it was gathering all this information, and that's exactly what makes it unsettling. It just assumed that in a connected city, your privacy didn't exist anymore. And here in 2025, that feels a little too on the nose. What's also interesting is how the profiler wasn't just a background detail. It shaped the way you played. You might see someone with a shady past and decide to follow them. Or you might find a potential criminal about to commit a crime and intervene. But on the flip side, you'd also stumble across heart-wrenching details. Someone struggling with debt. Someone suffering from illness. Someone who lost their job. Suddenly, non-player characters weren't just faceless background characters. They had stories. In fact, some of those quick little data blurbs hit harder than actual dialogue in the main story. It made Chicago feel alive, and it made your actions feel heavy. In a way, Watch Dogs 1 was ahead of its time by showing us how information itself could be a weapon. It wasn't just about hacking bridges or traffic lights. It was about knowing people, understanding their vulnerabilities, and realizing how easily that data could be exploited. If you think about it, that mechanic might actually be the most realistic part of the whole game. A gun can be dangerous, sure, but knowing everything about someone, that's real power. And I think that's why this feature still stands out today. Ubisoft didn't just give us an open world to mess around in, they handed us a digital mirror. One that showed us a future where privacy is an illusion. A lot of people criticized Watch Dogs 1 for overhyping itself, but if you revisit the profiler now, it feels less like a gimmick and more like a warning we didn't take seriously enough. So, next time you boot up Watch Dogs 1, try walking around Chicago with the profiler on for a while. Really take in the details. It's creepy, it's fascinating, and it might just make you think twice about what you share online. Because in the world of Watch Dogs, and honestly, in our world too, your data is never really yours. You know, most people playing Watch Dogs focus on hacking every camera, phone, or traffic light they can find, but there's this whole layer of storytelling baked right into the city itself that almost nobody talks about. I'm talking about Chicago. Yes, the same Chicago that's packed with cars, neon lights, and NPCs you'd normally ignore. But in Watch Dogs 1, the city itself is practically a character. And it's not just there to look pretty or make your missions more exciting. It's showing you subtly how life under constant surveillance feels. Think about it. The way pedestrians walk, how police cars patrol, the patterns of traffic, even random street conversations. Ubisoft didn't just sprinkle life into the streets. They programmed behaviors that react to your hacking and, more importantly, to the idea that someone could be watching you at any moment. Take, for example, the street performers, or the people waiting at bus stops. Most of the time, they just exist in the background, but pay attention when you hack a phone nearby. Some of them react in little ways, looking around nervously, pausing mid-step, or even muttering under their breath about feeling watched. It's easy to miss, but it's a tiny nod to paranoia and the surveillance culture that the game is trying to critique. You don't get a pop-up saying, "Hey, notice the NPC's nervous glances." You just feel it. That tension is what makes Watch Dogs more than a standard open-world sandbox. It's almost psychological, making the player complicit in the same behaviors they're trying to expose. And then there's traffic. Chicago's roads are like veins pumping life into the city, and every car, bus, or truck seems to have a purpose. Hack a traffic light, and suddenly, you're not just causing chaos for fun. You're witnessing how tiny changes ripple through the ecosystem of the city. Cars swerve, drivers curse, and pedestrians dodge in ways that feel very human. What's brilliant is that these reactions aren't just random. They're coded to reflect realistic human responses to disruptions. The AI isn't perfect, but it's sophisticated enough to give a sense of living in a city that's always under observation. This is something even people who've completed every mission and collected every clue rarely discuss. Let's talk about the subtle social commentary hidden in the city's architecture and urban layout. Chicago in Watch Dogs has these districts that feel distinct, not just visually, but emotionally. Take the affluent areas. Clean streets, organized traffic, plenty of security cameras. Then shift to the poorer districts, graffiti-covered walls, more street fights, broken infrastructure. It's not just aesthetic. It reinforces the idea of surveillance's unequal presence. Cameras and drones pop up where the city can afford it, and the chaos happens where monitoring is sparse. It's a commentary on modern urban life and how security, or the illusion of it, is distributed. You rarely see a video focusing on how the city design itself tells a story of inequality under surveillance. And that's a shame, because it's one of the game's most subtle, intelligent touches. Now, the NPCS's interactions also tell a story about privacy in a digital world. Some of them actually call out or react to Aiden's hacking in ways that are small but significant. A coffee shop patron might glance at their phone and smirk, or frown when you hack someone nearby. A jogger might pause and check the sky, as if sensing a drone overhead. It's tiny, but those moments make the city feel alive and responsive to the player's choices in a way most open-world games at the time didn't attempt. And if you think about it, it mirrors how we live today, how we react, often unconsciously, to the invisible systems of surveillance around us. The game is asking subtly, how would you act if you knew someone could watch your every move? Even the random ambient sounds contribute to this effect. Car alarms, distant sirens, shouted arguments, all timed with subtle NPC behaviors, create a subconscious narrative. It's chaos, but it's controlled chaos. Every small element reinforces the feeling that you're in a city where observation is constant, and consequences, even minor ones, ripple outward. Ubisoft doesn't shout this at you. There are no cutscenes explaining it. You just feel it if you pay attention. And that, I think, is what makes revisiting Watch Dogs so rewarding. You can complete every mission, steal every car, and still miss the story the city itself is telling. So next time you boot up Watch Dogs, don't just rush from hack to hack. When people talk about Watch Dogs, the conversation usually revolves around hacking, Aiden Pierce, or the thrill of manipulating Chicago's infrastructure. But there's a much subtler layer to the game that often gets overlooked. How the city itself, the NPCs, and their behavior silently comment on the social fabric of a hyper-connected world. Today, I want to explore that. Walking through Chicago in Watch Dogs, you're bombarded with the feeling that someone or something is always watching. Cameras, phones, and traffic lights are not just gameplay mechanics, they're storytelling tools. Every surveillance device scattered throughout the city contributes to a pervasive sense of tension. But what really gives the game its unique voice is how NPCs interact with this environment. Pedestrians are not just decoration. They respond to events in ways that are often subtle but incredibly telling. Someone might glance around nervously after a gunshot, or stop texting to stare at a police chase. These micro-interactions are a mirror to real-life urban behavior, and they highlight a psychological landscape shaped by constant observation. The NPC design in Watch Dogs does more than react. It communicates. Each person feels like they have their own digital footprint, much like we do in real life. You can pull up personal information about them through your profiler, and suddenly their simple actions, walking a dog, waiting at a crosswalk, acquire a layer of narrative significance. This mechanic transforms the city from a static backdrop into a living social experiment. You begin to realize that Watch Dogs isn't just about hacking machines. It's about hacking human perception and social norms. The city becomes a petri dish where digital surveillance and human behavior collide. One of the most overlooked aspects is how the game portrays social anxiety. NPCs often move in patterns that feel natural but subtly constrained, like they're aware of being observed. This mirrors studies in urban sociology, where people modify their behavior in highly surveilled spaces. Even the random events, like someone calling the police on a minor crime or fleeing when you engage in mischief, reflect the idea that society polices itself when the eyes of authority or the network are omnipresent. The game doesn't need to spell this out. It shows it through gameplay and city life, which makes the commentary far more immersive than any cutscene could. Another layer comes from environmental storytelling. Billboard ads, digital screens, and news reports aren't just flavor. They often reference data privacy, corporate overreach, or social unrest. The game subtly draws parallels between in-game technology and the real-world implications of surveillance. Even graffiti and background conversations tell a story about a city balancing between freedom and control. When Aiden hacks these systems, he's not just playing with tools. He's engaging in a dialogue with the city's social contract, disrupting a digital ecosystem that mirrors our own. Then, there's the emotional resonance. The developers understood that surveillance isn't just about fear, it's about human connection under tension. Certain NPCs express curiosity, fear, or suspicion depending on your actions, making you realize that a city under constant monitoring doesn't just change laws or behavior, it changes relationships. Friendships, mistrust, and even casual encounters are colored by the digital eyes everywhere. This layer makes Watch Dogs unique, because most open-world games focus on physical threats or action set pieces, whereas Watch Dogs emphasizes psychological dynamics in a digital ecosystem. What's truly brilliant is how these design choices encourage players to reflect on their own reality. The discomfort you feel while tailing a person, hacking their phone, or triggering chaos isn't accidental. The game forces you to consider the ethical implications of surveillance technology, and it does so without being preachy. By embedding this reflection into NPC behavior, environmental cues, and digital infrastructure. Watch Dogs becomes a commentary on our own cities, where data and observation are inescapable. Ultimately, if you want to understand why Watch Dogs still resonates years after its release, you have to look beyond hacking and action. You have to pay attention to the world building, the nuanced NPC behavior, and the way the city itself communicates. Watch Dogs isn't just a game about controlling technology. It's a game about controlling, and being controlled by, the social fabric of a networked society. It's a reminder that behind every screen, camera, or app, there's a human element. And the tension between privacy, freedom, and observation is not just in-game. It's in our everyday lives. So next time you play, don't just hack systems. When people think of Watch Dogs 1, they usually remember the hacking, the trench coat, or maybe how the driving felt a little, let's say, questionable. But there's something in the game that almost nobody talks about, and honestly, it's kind of scary when you think about it. Watch Dogs. 1 basically predicted our obsession with smartphones and how apps would end up controlling our lives. Think about it. Back in 2014, when Watch Dogs came out, we weren't glued to TikTok or scrolling Instagram for hours. Uber wasn't massive yet, food delivery apps weren't everywhere, and people weren't talking about privacy scandals the way they do now. Yet Ubisoft built an entire game around the idea that your phone isn't just a tool, it's your whole world. Aiden Pierce's smartphone is basically the ultimate app. He's not downloading games or ordering pizza with it. He's shutting down power grids, stealing bank info, controlling traffic lights, spying on strangers, all through a screen. And while it looks like over-the-top video game stuff, what's creepy is how close it feels to real life now. Here's the wild part. In Watch Dogs, you're constantly swiping into people's private lives and it feels like a mechanic. But today we actually do that, just legally. Social media lets us peek into strangers' lives at any time. Dating apps let us swipe through people as if they're files. Even your banking app is basically one hack away from chaos. Watch Dogs turned all of that into gameplay before we realized how normal it would become in everyday life. It's not really a hacker fantasy anymore, it's just Tuesday, and it doesn't stop there. Look at how the game handles NPC data. Every random person you scan has a name, a job, a hobby, a salary, maybe even a weird secret. At first, it feels like a fun gimmick. Oh, this guy's a firefighter, that person writes poetry. But it's also a reflection of how much personal data we give away without realizing it. Our phones know our health stats, our location history, our spending habits, our search history, and all of it is up for grabs if the wrong person wants it. In a way, the NPC profiles are Ubisoft's early version of what tech companies actually do now. Turn people into walking data points. Even the in-game apps mirror the rise of app culture. Remember how you could call a car on demand in Watch Dogs 1? That's basically Uber before Uber blew up. The Digital Trips minigame? That's like early VR before Oculus was mainstream. The game was practically waving a neon sign saying, "This is where society's heading." And most of us just went, "Cool, I can hack a bridge." What's really interesting is how Watch Dogs makes you complicit in it. You don't stop to ask if it's creepy to scan everyone's private details. You just do it because it helps you progress. And isn't that exactly how we use technology today? We don't think twice about letting apps track us if it means convenience. We click accept all cookies without even reading what data we're giving away. We hand over our fingerprints, our faces, our voices to companies and call it unlocking our phone. Watch Dogs is basically holding up a mirror and asking, "Are you okay with this?" And honestly, most of us answered, "Yeah, sure." As long as it's fast. Revisiting the game now is almost unsettling because so much of what felt like dystopian fiction in 2014 has quietly become normal life in 2025. We carry a KTOS in our pockets every day. It just has a friendlier design, brighter colors, and fewer explosions. But the principle is the same. One device, total control, endless surveillance. So, the next time someone says, Watch Dogs was just a clunky open-world game with some cool hacking gimmicks, remind them that it basically saw the future. The game wasn't just about Aiden Pierce fighting corrupt corporations. It was about how we'd all end up glued to these little glowing rectangles, trading privacy for convenience, one app at a time. And honestly,